Two pilots.
Yeah.
Two pilots.
Why is it doing 0 damage? See, this is the shit that annoys me.
What?
What?
Look at the pilot. He's just fucking tanking my guns.
It doesn't look like you're
Is
shooting.
this pilot
actually.
not dead?
Oh, I did
And I've disconnected. Never mind. Yeah. Well, there we go.
Okay.
Right. Deck. Right.
I can't
For
even
this shit,
reconnect.
I can't even reconnect. Right.
I'm gonna reboot. Don't worry, man. It's the balance that's the issue.
Yeah, it's a balance
It is
issue.
balance.
Broken Arrow PTE is currently struggling to decide what it wants to be, and that the community is also being dragged through an identity crisis at the same time, except the people in charge of changing the game themselves are also quite confused of what they're trying to do. Hello everyone, my name is Korn, and today I'd like to share with you my two thoughts of experiences and concerns with the PTE, both as an insider and a player. And before we continue, I just want to note a couple things down, like despite I have a really big passion and experience with the game, some things that I say might be biased, that will ultimately be biased, and that I might not always be correct. So if you feel like that's the case, just leave a comment down below or just dislike it if you like. I'll always read the comments and I'll respond to them to the best of my ability. So to start things off, I think I'd like to talk about the identity of the PTE. And as you'd expect, Steel Balalaika has different departments. The department in charge of the game design's main concern is ensuring game mechanics are balanced so that they are fun and engaging. Currently, it seems that they're very much focused on the PTE, and meanwhile the tech department has their hands full with the technical debt that has been accumulating even before the game's release, such as replays, server authentication, or even the small things such as being able to chat during the map vote, which really impacts the effectiveness of, getting the right map when you're solo queuing. In the beginning of May, I interviewed two members of the PT department who shared with me their vision of the PTE. And they're quite ambitious, at least I think, who wanted to make more units and strategies viable. And they wanted air-to-air, air-to-ground combat to be more skilled. And they even acknowledged that the PT is, in fact, overall a more intense environment that requires players to spend more time and attention on micro than previously. That being said, at the time of the interview, I really couldn't see that to be the case, due to the fact that Russians' guards motorized decks were on a rampage because of the cluster grad denying the usage of armor in forests, the MiG-29 SMT deleting any infantry in its way, or the Tochkas, or any ballistic missiles, but Tochkas in particular, being difficult to intercept. And that's even before mentioning the already powerful units, like the GRU, the SSO, and the TAZ. And it was pretty difficult to believe that what they were saying at the time, until the most recent patch, where both factions actually turned out to be pretty balanced. If you ask any tester or people who have played the PT for a certain amount of time, they'd probably tell you that the PT is actually pretty good, which, to surprise, in contrary to the PT's actual rating, that's kind of weird, isn't it? But to me, I think there are a couple reasons as to why this is the case, and I think I'll start by talking about what the PT does right. For example, the PT introduces a lot of good changes. For example, IVs being able to resupply infantry or heal them. Tanks now actually dealing tank damage. And these are some changes that I really enjoyed about the PT, and it did make the meta a lot more versatile than that kind of stuff, as bookers are no longer the main, being used, the unit that's being used the most. Basically, bookers are now nowhere to be seen. But besides these changes, along with some other stuff that's in the game, it's kind of a question that's out there where the game no longer seems sure that what kind of experience it's going to provide to the player base. And as mentioned previously, a couple of changes are kind of counterintuitive to both the casual and the competitive. For example, the new income system is actually designed for players to build army or rebuild them faster, which can be comprehended as, please, feel free to spawn more units. And as a result, it's natural that people find themselves fighting against more units than usual, on top of the fact that smaller, cheaper squads are also buffed to be more resilient than before. Well, I forgot to add this, but the changes I just mentioned are already implemented into the live version of the game. The only reason I'm showing this is because more sense now. It's like if you're panicked, then you're prone to more damage, and if you are not panicked, then you take less damage. This is the opposite on live, so just keep in mind, because as long as you apply panic as fast as possible, then you will have a faster time to kill on the PTE. Aside from that, the long-awaited overkill system is now on the PTE, except there were also two significant changes. First, one-taps are no more, which SAMs no longer deal more than 19 damage, therefore not one-tapping them anymore. Second, their maximum range has been drastically reduced from reaching over 8 kilometers down to going as far as 6.5 kilometers. As a result, SAMs are no longer capable of stopping airstrikes effectively, and they aren't particularly good at intercepting ballistic missiles either. This has given rise to air superiority fighters, or ASF in short, except they still can't shoot down bombers before they drop their payload. And yeah, that sounds like a lot of new stuff, which, yeah, it's true, but that's still not even half of what the game was, like, the PTE was about. And I mean, like, we haven't even mentioned the conquest or artillery nerfs. There's so much more. And it's pretty much a valid concern to be skeptical about this gigantic bombshell of a patch that's going to be dropped on our foreheads if the devs decided to push everything live. And I was watching Hornet GT's video the other day and about the PTE, and something really resonated with me, which it was pretty much a valid concern, being that since there are so many changes happening at the same time, the live patch simply can't even count as a control group at all. To me, I think the average player is going to feel like having an entire box of ice cream shoved down their throat, which is a difference that is too big to be gone unnoticed.
Yes, and it's this problem. Like many players say PTE have so many changes, but the problem was like it was no changes at all in last year.
Yeah. If you did small changes, then it would take a long time.
We would like to make small changes in this whole period, because it's better for the game, it's better for players to make like refreshing gameplay all the times. However, it was some problem on our side, and we was not able to deliver these patches all the time. Like one of the improvement, maybe not, like after the Baltic DLC and PTE's game become less size, probably will 20 gigabyte less size. So, and another internal thing, it was even not in patch note, if I remember correctly, but now we're able to deploy patches more often, because the size is not so dramatic anymore. Because before, even smaller changes required super big patches.
10 gigabyte updates, I remember.
Yes, it's even more. 10 gigabyte is really small. The average is 20 or even 50. So yeah, it's not acceptable, as you can see, for the even small patches.
The largest concern of everything is the fact that the player base is currently being split in two. The hardcore and the casuals, with the hardcore being on the PTE. Which is honestly not true, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people like me probably misunderstood what the devs were talking about. And I think we can use this game mechanic, the resupply feature, as an example to prove my point. So currently, infantry that are nearby in 9V are able to heal up their squad and recover lost soldiers. You would not be unfamiliar to this mechanic if you previously played like Company of Heroes, where ambulances or half-tracks can reinforce infantry on the front line, just much slower. However, the idea that your troop transports can pull more dudes out when they were previously full doesn't really sound that realistic to me, or make a lot of sense. And instead, I think instead of saying that these are hardcore stuff, I would just say I would rather use the term realistic to describe changes that, could feel a bit more logical, but also not balance breaking or unpleasant for the average player's experience. And to give you an example, before the PT went live, you used to be able to heal infantry inside IFVs even if they were panicked, which is something that previously couldn't, is just not possible if they were panicked on supply dumps. So you could literally put the infantry that just went through a firefight back into their IFV that's parked next to their building, heal them back up within the next 20 seconds, and then throw them back into the meat grinder. And that's kind of what I ended up suggesting. Like, hey, this is just not real. That, it doesn't make that much sense, and it feels kind of broken at the same time. So, they eventually patched that. And among the many changes also lies an overall reduction in aim time of tank guns, autocannons, and ATGMs, and it's natural to think that the front line is now more lethal, with less time to kill and less time to react to threats. I interviewed the devs about this higher APM gameplay, in which their response was, do you think that this is the approach of where the game should be going, to have to be a bit more punishing if the player is sitting back and eating something, or what do you think about this?
Well, for me, it's a very dangerous way. Like I told you a bit earlier, we very, careful in this approach, because it's game become faster in some aspects. You're right.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And we want to see how player base is actually able to manage with it, how to be able to deal with it.
I see.
Because it's a target cognitive for us, because it's different players, different styles. Like we have review, I'll say. We ask players how PTE has become more difficult for you, but problem is most of the guys who answer was 100 or 500 more hours in the game. So you see they have some experienced players. And it's a big question for me right now how it will affect the majority of player base who have not so many hours, or just guys who come around to check how the game looks like. We don't want to make his experience suffering or something like this.
To summarize this hardcore Broken Arrow debate, I would say it's both a combination of realism and high cortisol gameplay. And that's my opinion from what I've observed. And still a rather optimistic one, which we really don't know where the devs are going with the PTE. And that's pretty much why everyone's so concerned. But, more problems actually exist. So maybe that's not all the reasons why everyone's so concerned. So, speaking of the real problems of Broken Arrow, I think everyone's kind of been fighting overbalance on the PT, where when the actual reasons that people quit Broken Arrow or leave the game have little to do with it. Broken Arrow is an RTS that does not have the basic features of an RTS. For anyone interested in buying the game, probably spends more than 5 minutes reading Steam reviews, and that's pretty much everyone, to be honest. And they'll quickly realize that there are no replays, no game saving, a lot of desync, and disconnects. The game isn't even server-sided if you think about it. And these are all comments made by people that are no longer playing or have left Broken Arrow's community. And as addicting as a game Broken Arrow is, if people are being pushed back or gatekept from buying or returning to Broken Arrow just by the game's state of incompletion, the game will inevitably die. And here's the thing. Despite Broken Arrow being just as popular as Company of Heroes 2 or 3, or much more than Warno, the fact that it needs 10 players for each game is also a pretty big problem. With disconnects happening and the lack of a healthy player base, it's natural that the quality of games are going to be going downward. I could go on for 10 or more minutes about this topic, but I think I've made my point. The biggest thing holding Broken Arrow back from more success has a lot less to do with what's about the game's balance and more about its actual issues. the issues like tech-wise, that kind of stuff. And it's a really terrible decision if they divert the already fractured player base on top of all these issues. I mean, like, if players actually wanted to go play some hardcore stuff, they could always go play Warno, right? In 1v1s and just suffer in it if they fail, like me. Which, I've tried it before, but ultimately I just come back to BA because I like BA more. That's basically what happened. And so everything I mentioned previously is probably known to the public, or if you think about it, but the things I'm going to be mentioning later are going to be a bit more on the internal side of BA. And it's about the communication issues among like the devs and the content creators, and sometimes the testers and the players as well. So, well, I mean, I can just throw you an example right here, which is a real argument that I've heard from another content creator claiming that the PTE is a success and well received due to the fact that the current player count is higher than before the DLC released. I was speechless because I don't know that you could have a graph reading. People with graph reading skills like this actually existed. But anyways, Okay, sure. Let's take a look at the graphs then. So I looked at the graphs and then I thought to myself, okay, the current player count is around 5,000, sometimes less, sometimes more. Okay, sure. Yes, it is more than, before the DLC came out. But when the DLC came out, the player count spiked all the way up to 10K. And then it dropped down because people probably realized that, the game still has desyncs, the game still has disconnects, no game saves. So people ultimately drop the game because it's just content. And if the core issues of the game are never dealt with, even though every time we get probably new content, it's just going to get dropped eventually. So that's the first reason why we currently have more players than before the DLC dropped. And if you think about it, it's been about a month since the since the public beta, public test environment, the PT has been released, and the player count has dropped by an alarming rate, much faster than the last time we were actually at 10K, at 10,000 player count. So, yeah, I don't really know, the guy I talked to was a guy that was actually in close proximity with the devs, and I don't know, what are they doing normally? I don't know, I actually don't know. And another thing that the devs seemed, or other folks seemed rather emphasized on, was survey feedback, or just broken arrow reviews in general, where, as I mentioned previously, if you spend 5 minutes reading Steam reviews, balance is actually not that big of an issue. It's just the core problems of broken arrow being the ones I mentioned previously. Okay, I'm not going to go through that again. And the last problem, which I don't think it's that big, but I also think it's kind of big, is the fact that the devs speak Russian, which, it's natural, they're for a game studio, they got to be located somewhere in the world, right? And then they have their mother tongue, so they speak their mother tongue to each other. For example, Genshin Impact or any Hoyoverse games are being designed or being developed in China. And it's natural that they receive a lot of feedback in Chinese, and they speak Chinese when they speak to these players. True. However, I think it's still reasonable to assume that the devs should still be interacting on, at least the English platforms, which the reality of Broken Arrow is that they rarely even speak on the English channels, and they actually are on the Russian channels on a daily basis. So it's kind of true. The English chats are where most of the testers and content creators speak, right? And it's really reasonable to assume that despite the devs claiming that they read everything, the rest of the community is just going to feel ignored, or just, not responded to or neglected. So, yeah, at least that's how we feel. And when content creators first joined the program, I admit that a major drive was that we actually wanted to see new content and therefore publish to our communities so that at least when other people publish about the PT, I'm not going to be left out. That's pretty much a main drive here. And, even though this is quite important about maintaining audiences and the algorithm, that kind of stuff on YouTube, as time went on, only a few content creators are still actively commenting on the balance and the changes of the PTE, which I've mentioned in the previous point, and it really hasn't been properly responded to, or at least addressed, or, applied as in, thank you, we'll take into consideration, maybe we'll actually test it out. We tested it out, hooray! No. And as a result, everyone there, or was previously active, has probably either given up, left the program, or stopped caring at all, and it's quite depressing. So if you ask me about the PT, I really think that it feels much like the Windows 11 side grade. It's a side grade to me. That's an opinion, but I still think it's a side grade, because if vanilla had any main or core issues, vanilla Broken Arrow, having the PT being slammed into the vanilla wouldn't actually fix those issues. So why are we so rushed into going into the PT anyways? That's my question. And along with the fact that the devs feel overly optimistic about everything, yeah, it's natural that everyone feels concerned. So to sum this all up, I know I ranted a lot, or a bit, I don't know. I think Broken Arrow doesn't really need another massive redesign so urgently, or an experimental meta, nor a split version of the game that separates, we're losing players already at a drastic rate. And instead, it would be ideal to brand the good changes of the PTE as minor improvements to the game, and let the player base adapt to them before introducing more changes. The main focus of the development of the game should be instead on the technical side, and then the content, and finally the experimental gameplay changes. The communication between the devs and the player base, both internally and externally, really need to be improved on as much as the game itself. And I really can't read a PT dev blog without being rage baited, and I'm pretty sure I'm not alone. Finally, I believe people who criticize Broken Arrow wish the game to succeed. And by succeed, I mean to be a really popular RTS game. I meet people that are passionate about Broken Arrow's vision and future all the time, and everyone is pretty much worried about the things that are going the opposite way. Anyways, I'm really glad you made it to the end. This is the end of the video, and please leave a like or subscribe or comment down below if you agree or disagree with me. And a lot of thanks to everyone for supporting the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you, and bye-bye.